The grand chamber of the Galactic Council shimmered with golden light, its massive ceiling made of crystal that reflected the stars beyond. Thousands of alien delegates filled the curved tiers, their voices echoing like thunder in a storm of arrogance and pride. Flags of every empire and species hung from the upper walls, glowing softly with shifting colors. In the center of the hall stood a long oval table of silver alloy, and at its far end sat the one representative who wasn't speaking, the human ambassador. He sat in silence, hands folded, eyes calm, as the shouting around him grew louder. The other delegates, scaled, feathered, and luminous, argued with passion and disdain, each trying to speak louder than the last. Humans cannot be trusted, one alien hissed. They bring their wars wherever they go. Another slammed a clawed hand on the table. They act as if their way is the only way. The council speaker, a tall being with skin like glass and eyes that glowed from within, finally raised his hand. The noise fell quiet. The matter is decided, he said with cold finality. After years of disruption and emotional interference, the species known as humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Alliance. A ripple of approval passed through the chamber. Some delegates applauded, others banged their staffs against the floor. The human ambassador, a man in a simple dark suit, did not move. He had known this moment would come. For years, the council had mocked humanity's insistence on compassion and cooperation. They called it weakness. Humans shared technology, repaired failing colonies, and negotiated peace where others sought war. But instead of gratitude, the council grew suspicious. Humanity had become too influential, too admired by smaller worlds. The speaker continued, his voice echoing. Let the record show that Earth has been removed from all trade agreements and defense pacts. Their fleets will be denied entry to council-controlled space. Their voice in this chamber is no longer required. The human ambassador rose slowly. The movement alone drew eyes across the hall. Even those who had mocked him moments ago fell silent for a breath. He was not angry, not defiant, only calm, almost sorrowful. His voice carried through the chamber, quiet but strong. You believe emotion is weakness, he said softly. You believe that because we cry, because we care, because we remember every life we lose, we are somehow less than you. The speaker leaned forward. You misunderstand us, human. It is not weakness we despise, it is chaos. You let your hearts lead when logic should rule. The ambassador smiled faintly. And yet it was our hearts that saved you more times than you can count. The crowd stirred uneasily. The words cut deeper than they expected. The ambassador continued. When your colonies starved after the Great Freeze, who brought food convoys through the radiation storms? When the plague of dross spread through your border worlds, whose doctors crossed quarantine lines? When your fleets fell to civil war, who stood between you to end it? No one answered. The speaker's glowing eyes flickered. Enough. Humanity's record of service is known, but it is no longer relevant. The council stands united in this decision. The ambassador nodded slowly. Then the council stands united in ignorance. A murmur rose in the chamber. Be careful, human, another delegate snarled. Your species walks a thin line between pride and foolishness. The ambassador met his gaze. So does yours, he said quietly. He stepped away from his seat and began walking toward the great doors at the back of the chamber. Every step echoed across the floor like a heartbeat in the silence that followed. Just before reaching the exit, he turned one last time to face the crowd. His voice dropped lower, and every translator in the room carried his words across 1,000 languages. You think emotion is weakness, he said. But emotion is what keeps civilizations alive. It is the difference between peace and destruction, between wisdom and pride, between survival and extinction. His eyes swept across the crowd, meeting each species, the proud, the powerful, the indifferent. And when the time comes that you realize this, when your logic fails you, when your strength isn't enough, remember who you sent away. The doors opened with a deep metallic hum. Light from the corridor beyond poured into the hall, bathing the human in a halo of white. He turned and walked through, never once looking back. The doors closed behind him with a final, echoing boom that seemed to shake the air. For a long moment, the chamber remained perfectly still. Then one of the delegates let out a short, nervous laugh. Another joined in. Soon the hall filled again with noise, mockery, arrogance, relief. "Good riddance," someone said. "Let them run back to their primitive world." The speaker struck his staff on the floor. "This meeting is concluded," he declared. "Let it be known that the galaxy no longer bends to the will of humankind." The delegates rose and began to leave, still talking, still laughing. But not everyone laughed. At the far edge of the hall, in one of the upper tiers, a small reptilian delegate leaned toward his companion. His scales were pale, his voice low and uneasy. "Tell me," he whispered, "who will maintain the defense grid now that their engineers are gone?" His companion shrugged. "Someone else will learn." "And the trade routes?" the reptilian asked. "Half of them were charted by human captains." Another shrug. "We'll adapt." The reptilian's eyes narrowed. "And if they stop sharing their medicine? Their food? Their communication systems?" This time, there was no answer. He looked toward the doors where the human had left and felt a strange chill in his bones. The hall still echoed with laughter, but to him, it sounded hollow, forced. He whispered to himself, "What happens when they stop helping us?" Far away, on the silent blue planet called Earth, a dozen massive orbital stations began to power down their communication beacons. One by one, the signals connecting humanity to the galaxy winked out. Trade lanes that had glowed with traffic dimmed, and the great relay satellites went dark. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy fell quiet. The humans were leaving, not with war, not with anger, but with silence. And somewhere deep in that silence, a truth began to form in the hearts of those who had mocked them. The galaxy had just made the worst decision in its history. Days turned into weeks, and the silence humanity left behind began to spread like a shadow across the stars. At first, the Galactic Council saw it as a victory. Without human ambassadors questioning their authority or pushing for empathy and reform, meetings ran faster, votes passed more easily, and decisions went unchallenged. The council hall was quieter, more efficient, or so they told themselves. But beneath that calm surface, something vital had changed. The air felt emptier. The spark that once made the council's debates alive, the balance between logic and emotion, was gone. Across the galaxy, humans packed their stations, dismantled their colonies, and returned home. Cargo bays once filled with alien goods were emptied. Interstellar freighters bearing Earth's symbol vanished from trade routes. At every outpost, alien workers stood watching as human engineers finished their final tasks. One alien foreman tried to speak as the humans loaded the last of their crates onto their transport ship. "You don't have to leave," he said quietly. "This isn't your fight." The lead engineer, a woman with streaks of gray in her hair, smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong," she said. "We fought for all of you, even when you didn't see it." When the transport's engines lit up, its hum echoed through the valley like a farewell. The aliens stood in silence, realizing too late that this wasn't just the end of a contract, it was the end of an era. By the second month, trade routes began to feel the absence. The galactic commerce fleets, which had always relied on human pilots to navigate dangerous sectors, started losing ships. Their autopilot systems couldn't handle the uncharted wormholes that humans once crossed with instinct. The alien captains complained about malfunctions, delays, and disappearances. "It's temporary," the council insisted. "Our own navigators will adapt." But adaptation came slowly. On the third month, one of the main supply convoys to the outer colonies vanished without a trace. The investigation revealed what everyone already feared. Pirates had returned. And without the human patrol fleets that once guarded the routes, no one could stop them. Meanwhile, communication networks began to falter. The advanced relay systems that connected thousands of worlds had been designed by human scientists decades ago. They were intricate, living networks that required constant calibration, something only human technicians truly understood. When one of the outer relays failed, the council sent engineers from other species to fix it. They followed the blueprints perfectly, double-checked their calculations, and reactivated the array. It worked for one day before collapsing completely, leaving dozens of systems cut off from the rest of the galaxy. The Council ordered more repairs, but each attempt only made things worse. By the 4th month, entire sectors were silent. In the great halls of the Council, unease began to grow. Meetings became longer, the tone more desperate. "We underestimated their role," one delegate admitted. "They handled more than we realized." The speaker, proud and unyielding, dismissed the concern. "The alliance is vast," he said. "We are not dependent on one species." But his words rang hollow. Behind the scenes, diplomats whispered about collapsing economies and rising unrest. On several frontier worlds, alien governors sent secret requests to Earth, begging for assistance. None received a reply. The humans had locked their systems behind quantum encryption. No message, no plea, no apology could reach them. Back on Earth, life had changed too, but differently. The skies above the planet shimmered with traffic as fleets returned home, bringing scientists, workers, and ambassadors who had lived among the stars for generations. The cities glowed with light, powered by new technology that had been ready for decades but never deployed out of respect for interspecies cooperation. Now, humanity focused only on itself. The planet that once sent doctors and diplomats across the galaxy became self-contained, a fortress of calm efficiency. Yet beneath that calm, there was disappointment, even grief. People missed their friends among the stars, the worlds they helped build, the lives they shared. But humanity had given enough, and the galaxy had rejected them. "Let them see what life is without us," one senator said quietly during a broadcast. "Let them understand that emotion isn't weakness. It's the only thing that keeps chaos from spreading." By the 6th month, the cracks in the alliance were impossible to ignore. A famine broke out on Tarsis 4, one of the largest agricultural planets in the Midrim. Its climate control systems, originally stabilized by human engineers, malfunctioned after decades of perfect performance. The crops failed, storms raged, and millions starved. The Council tried to send aid, but their transport ships were hijacked by smugglers and pirates. When a desperate transmission from the Tarsis governor reached the Council, her voice trembled. "You promised stability," she said. "You promised peace. The humans warned you this would happen." Her transmission ended in static, and no further signal was ever received. The Council began to fracture. Some races blamed the speaker for arrogance. Others demanded that humanity be brought back immediately. But how do you call back those you exiled with laughter? Pride kept the Council from admitting their mistake, and fear kept them from saying the words aloud. "We need them." In the following weeks, unrest spread to the core worlds. Protests filled the plazas of the Council capital. "Bring back Earth," banners read. "We are dying without them." But the speaker refused to listen. "They are not gods," he declared in frustration. "They were emotional, reckless, unstable. We are better off without their interference." Yet even as he spoke, the chamber lights flickered. The Council's energy network, also designed by human hands, was failing. Somewhere beyond the stars, human ships quietly patrolled the edges of their own space. They watched the turmoil unfold through long-range sensors, recording every broadcast, every transmission. Humanity had sworn not to interfere. But deep in the control center of Earth's orbital defense ring, an old man stood watching the screens. He was the same ambassador who had once sat in the Council's chamber. His hair was gray now, his hands folded behind his back. One of the young officers approached him nervously. "Sir," she said, "should we respond to their distress signals?" The ambassador's eyes stayed fixed on the holographic display showing worlds in flames and fleets collapsing. His voice was calm, but his words carried quiet pain. "No," he said. "They made their choice. Now they must live with it." Back in the heart of the galaxy, the speaker stood alone in his office, staring out over the city. The once busy skies were nearly empty now. Trade had stopped, communication lines were dead, and the outer colonies were silent. For the first time, the mighty capital felt small, fragile. A single thought echoed in his mind, a voice he could not forget. "You think emotion is weakness," the human had said. "But it's what keeps civilizations alive." The speaker whispered into the empty air. Perhaps he was right. Far beyond, on a dark world where the night sky glittered with unfamiliar constellations, a single satellite blinked with a faint signal, the last functioning human relay in alien space. Its lonely transmission repeated the same message over and over again, carried through the void on silent waves of light. End of contact. Earth has withdrawn. The galaxy must learn alone. The silence that spread across the galaxy after humanity's departure became heavier with each passing month, like an invisible weight pressing down on every world. The Council's grand chambers, once alive with arguments, laughter, and pride, now felt hollow. Whole sections of the capital's skyways were dark, and the great spires that used to shine with the colors of 1,000 species now flickered dimly, half-powered by malfunctioning grids. Yet, the speaker still told the press that everything was under control. "The galaxy will adapt," he said firmly. "The loss of one species does not define the fate of civilization." But his voice, once filled with confidence, trembled ever so slightly at the end of his statement. And across the stars, the galaxy's heart slowly began to fail. On the outer colonies, where humans had once trained fleets and repaired stations, chaos bloomed. Pirates, smugglers, and warlords rose from the ashes of old fear. Without human patrol ships guarding the trade lanes, lawless factions filled the vacuum. One convoy carrying food supplies to a frontier world vanished entirely. Its remains were later found drifting near an asteroid belt, burned and looted. The governor of that world sent a furious message to the council. "You promised order. You said humanity was the problem, but without them, the galaxy burns." The message never received a response. The communication network, weakened by months of neglect and human-designed algorithms no one could repair, collapsed within hours of the transmission being sent. On the central worlds, the crisis grew more subtle, but far more dangerous. The humans had not only been soldiers or engineers. They were teachers, negotiators, architects of unity. Their influence had seeped into every layer of civilization. Medical systems began to fail as human-developed nanotech started to malfunction. Diseases thought long cured began reappearing. On one world, an alien child coughed as its father stared helplessly at the inactive medical drones. "Why won't they work?" he cried. The doctor could only shake his head. "They were built using human code. We never learned how to fix it." Hospitals filled, and hope drained away. In the council's grand chamber, the mood was no better. Delegates shouted over each other, demanding answers. "The outer sectors have fallen," one delegate roared. "Trade is collapsing," another screamed. The speaker slammed his staff down, his translucent skin glowing faintly. "We will regain control," he bellowed. "We have survived worse." But deep down, he knew this wasn't true. The galaxy had never survived without humanity. The humans had been the silent gears that kept everything running, the unseen balance between pride and compassion. And now, without them, the machine was breaking apart piece by piece. A trembling aide entered the chamber carrying a data tablet. "Speaker," she said softly, "we've received reports from the Corim sector. It's gone dark. No signals, no travel logs, nothing." The speaker froze. "That's impossible," he said. Corim was a major trading hub. "It was," the aide whispered. "Until 3 days ago. They say a chain reaction destroyed the orbital reactors. Millions are gone." The delegates erupted in panic. "Sabotage," one shouted. "Human revenge," cried another. The speaker raised his hand sharply. "Enough. Humanity is gone. They are not to blame for our failures." But even as he said it, a small part of him wondered if this was all part of their quiet warning, if humanity's departure was not punishment, but prophecy. Meanwhile, far from the core, in the void between stars, the first human ships to disappear months ago now drifted beyond known space. They were not destroyed, they were hidden. Entire fleets floated within dark zones, watching, monitoring, recording. Humanity had sworn not to intervene, but they had not sworn to stop caring. On the bridge of one such ship, Captain Elias Wren watched holographic feeds of alien worlds descending into chaos. "They are tearing themselves apart," his first officer said quietly. Elias didn't answer for a long time. "They have to," he said finally. "Only when something breaks do you understand how much you needed it." Back in the galaxy's heart, the economic collapse had begun. Markets crashed as trade routes shut down, and food shortages reached even the wealthiest worlds. Refugee ships crowded the spaceports, desperate to escape systems where starvation had begun. The Council tried to form relief fleets, but without the humans' hyperdrive optimization systems, their ships couldn't move fast enough. A mission that once took days now took weeks. "If only we still had human navigators," one commander muttered bitterly as his vessel limped toward a dying colony. They saw the stars differently. When they finally arrived, it was too late. The colony had fallen into civil war. By the 10th month, the Galactic Alliance no longer existed. Whole species withdrew, forming their own protective alliances. Border skirmishes broke out. The Council sent messages begging for cooperation, but no one listened. For centuries, humanity had been the thread that bound them all, the voice that calmed wars before they began. Without that voice, the old wounds reopened. On one world, two rival species reignited a conflict humanity had ended generations ago. Cities burned, and the night sky filled with the fire of orbital strikes. In the aftermath, one alien commander stood over the ruins and whispered, "Humans would have stopped this." Inside the Council's central tower, the speaker sat alone in his private quarters, staring at the stars through the transparent walls. The once crowded skies of the capital were empty now. No trade ships, no lights, no laughter. Just silence. He poured himself a glass of dark liquid, his reflection staring back at him. "We were so certain," he muttered. "So sure they were the problem." He closed his eyes and heard the human ambassador's voice echoing in his memory. "You think emotion is weakness, but it's what keeps civilizations alive." The speaker whispered the words to himself, the regret heavy in his voice. "And now we are dying without it." Elsewhere, on one of the abandoned human stations orbiting a dying star, a group of alien scavengers landed, hoping to steal leftover supplies. They walked through the empty corridors, flashlights cutting through the dark. The walls were covered in dust, but still humming faintly with power. On one wall, carved by hand, they found a message burned into the metal. "You will miss us when we're gone." The leader of the scavengers stared at it for a long time before whispering, they were right. The next few months were worse. Entire civilizations vanished into silence. The Council stopped meeting altogether, its members either dead, hiding, or fleeing to distant worlds. News transmissions ceased. The galaxy, once alive with music, communication, and unity, had gone still. The only remaining lights were the quiet human beacons, glowing faintly in the dark, each one pulsing like a heartbeat. And yet, in that stillness, some began to understand. On a small planet in the outer rim, a group of alien survivors gathered in a ruined temple. They lit candles, a human tradition one of them had learned long ago. They said emotions were dangerous, one elder said, her voice trembling. But perhaps love, hope, and sorrow are what hold life together. Another nodded slowly. "We mocked them," he whispered. "And now their silence teaches us more than their words ever did." For the first time in history, the galaxy truly understood what humanity had meant when they said emotion was strength. Because without them, without their compassion and chaos and care, the stars no longer felt alive. The Council's arrogance had not just driven away a species, it had silenced the very soul of the galaxy. The galaxy had grown eerily quiet. No laughter, no celebration, no sound of commerce or progress echoed through the once bustling trade lanes. Spaceports that had once been alive with ships from 100 worlds now stood abandoned, their landing pads coated in dust and their control towers flickering with dying lights. The silence wasn't just in sound, it was in spirit. Entire civilizations felt hollow, their confidence drained. They had believed themselves self-sufficient, powerful, and advanced, but now the truth was becoming clear. They had been children playing in a universe that humanity had quietly held together. On the central world of Arix Prime, home to one of the most powerful members of the Galactic Council, panic had become the new normal. The food distribution systems, once managed through human-designed AI networks, were breaking down. Farmers screamed that the harvesters wouldn't respond, cities begged for supplies, and riots broke out across the capital. The governor tried to maintain order, giving desperate speeches from his palace balcony. "The alliance stands strong," he shouted into the roaring crowd. But even as he spoke, his lights flickered and died. The people looked up at the dark sky, realizing their power grid had failed again. The crowd's anger turned to fear. Some shouted to contact Earth, to call for human engineers, but the governor had no answer. "They are gone," he said finally. "They are not coming back." The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. Across other worlds, things were no better. On Coram Station, one of the galaxy's largest trade hubs, the docks were filled with ships that couldn't launch. Their jump drives refused to engage. Their AI cores locked out after failing security checks designed by human programmers decades ago. Without human overrides, the ships were useless. A merchant captain slammed his fist against the console, cursing. "They built everything with codes only they could unlock," he yelled. His first mate looked pale. Maybe they knew this would happen. The captain froze, realizing she might be right. The humans hadn't designed the galaxy to depend on them, but they had designed it to require understanding, compassion, and cooperation to function. Without that, everything fell apart. In the crumbling council chamber, the few remaining delegates gathered in silence. The grand banners that once represented thousands of species hung torn and faded. Half the seats were empty. The speaker looked tired, his once glowing skin now dull. Reports littered his desk: food shortages, reactor meltdowns, civil wars, disease outbreaks. He rubbed his temples as the last remaining envoys argued. "We must contact them," shouted one. "We must apologize." Another pounded the table. "They abandoned us. They left us to die." The speaker's voice broke through, weary but firm. "No," he said. "We pushed them away. They only did what we told them to." The room fell quiet. "We thought emotion was a weakness," he said softly. "But now we see it was the one thing keeping us from destroying ourselves." A trembling assistant entered the chamber with new data. "Sir," she said, "we've detected movement on the edge of human space." Every delegate looked up. "Movement?" one asked. "Military?" The assistant nodded uncertainly. "We don't know. It could be patrols, or something else." The speaker leaned forward. "Did they respond to our transmissions?" "No, sir. As always, no response." The speaker's shoulders sagged. "Then they're watching," he whispered. The thought filled the chamber with a strange mix of fear and hope. The humans weren't gone. They were waiting. But waiting for what? Back on Earth, things were different. The humans had flourished in isolation. Their cities glowed like stars against the dark oceans, powered by technologies far beyond what they had ever shared. The sky shimmered with orbital defenses, massive rings of steel and light designed not for attack, but for protection. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful, too peaceful. Humanity had retreated not in defeat, but in decision. They had learned that helping those who refuse to learn only delays their fall. In a command center deep beneath the mountains, a council of human leaders met in quiet conversation. "The council is collapsing," one said, her voice steady but cold. "Their transmissions are filled with begging and fear." Another nodded. "They wanted us gone. Now they see the cost." A third leaned forward. "Do we intervene?" Silence filled the room. The oldest among them finally spoke. "No," he said. "They made their choice. Let the lesson take root. Only when they understand, truly understand, will our return mean anything." On the other side of the galaxy, the lesson was being written in blood. Without human mediators, old wars reignited. Two rival species, the Dras and the Velians, had signed peace under Earth's supervision decades ago. But now, with no one left to hold them accountable, They returned to their ancient hatred. Armies clashed on scorched worlds, their skies filled with burning ships. Cities turned to ash, and the screams of the dying echoed through the void. A single broadcast from a Velian general reached what remained of the council. His voice trembled with despair. "We killed them all," he said. "We killed each other. The humans told us this would happen. Why didn't we listen?" The transmission cut off, leaving nothing but static. In the ruins of the council's capital, looters roamed the streets. Statues of the old rulers lay broken. A group of refugees huddled near a fountain that once shimmered with blue water, now cracked and dry. One of them, a young alien child, asked her mother softly, "Will the humans ever come back?" The mother didn't answer at first. She looked up at the sky, dark and empty, with no ships passing through, and whispered, "I don't know." The child pressed closer to her side. "They always helped us before." The mother closed her eyes, fighting tears. "Yes," she said, "and we sent them away." Months later, the speaker finally made the decision that had been haunting him since the day humanity left. He stood before what remained of the council and announced, "We will send an envoy to Earth. We will ask for forgiveness." The delegates murmured in agreement, though none of them truly believed it would work. Still, they prepared a small diplomatic vessel and sent it toward the Sol system, carrying messages of apology, desperate pleas for help, and promises to change. The ship traveled for weeks through unstable warp corridors until it finally reached the edge of human-controlled space. There, the envoy saw it for the first time. A wall of light stretching across the void. A massive defense grid unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of satellites and ships hovered in formation, motionless but alive, their hulls reflecting the glow of Earth's sun. The envoy tried to send a signal. "This is Council Vessel Serenity," the commander said nervously. "We come in peace. We come seeking dialogue." For a long moment, there was no response. Then, a single message appeared on their console, written in clean, simple text. "Access denied." The message repeated once more, then the entire grid flashed bright and vanished into stealth mode, leaving the envoy staring at the empty stars. When they returned, the speaker listened to their report in silence. "Access denied," he repeated slowly. He stood at the window, looking out over the dying capital. "We denied them first," he whispered. "Now they've only returned the favor." The room stayed quiet. No one dared to speak. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the city, a storm breaking through the endless drought. Rain began to fall on the streets, washing over the ruins, whispering softly against the stone. The speaker closed his eyes and whispered, "We called them too emotional. But emotion is what keeps the light burning." And as the rain poured down, the galaxy's silence deepened. The humans had left not just a void in technology or power, but a void in heart. And for the first time in its long, proud history, the Galactic Council began to understand that the fall of a civilization does not come when its weapons fail or its systems collapse. It comes when it forgets how to care. The rain did not stop for days on the dying capital world. For the first time in centuries, the planet's streets were empty of banners, parades, and meetings. The great council towers, once glowing with the light of thousands of species, now stood dark and hollow. The citizens watched the sky as the storm raged, and in that endless downpour, they felt something they had long forgotten: sorrow. The proud Galactic Council, the empire that ruled the stars, had finally learned humility. But it came too late. Humanity's silence had become the loudest sound in the galaxy. The Council's remaining members gathered in the dim chamber, the same hall where years ago they had mocked the humans and voted to exile them. Now it was half empty, echoing with the hum of broken lights and the distant rumble of thunder. The speaker sat at the center of the circular table, his robes soaked, his expression hollow. Around him, the few surviving delegates whispered in hushed tones. "The outer colonies have fallen," one reported weakly. "Trade routes are gone. The Tarsi system declared independence and refuses to send resources." Another delegate spoke shakily, "Our fleets are losing power. The reactors were built using human engineering. We can't maintain them without their specialists." The speaker closed his eyes. How many worlds have gone dark? The aide hesitated. 4 to 7, sir. The silence that followed felt colder than the rain outside. As the speaker stared at the ruined chamber, his mind wandered back to the day humanity left. He remembered the human ambassador's calm voice, the warning in his eyes. You think emotion is weakness. You'll learn it's what keeps civilizations alive. The words haunted him now. He turned toward the others. We mocked them, he said softly. We thought ourselves advanced. But they were the ones holding the galaxy together. One delegate slammed his fist down. Then bring them back. Send another envoy. The speaker's voice cracked. We tried. They've sealed their borders. They don't trust us anymore. On the other side of the galaxy, chaos had turned into collapse. Entire sectors fell into ruin. Spaceports turned into battlegrounds as starving citizens fought over what little food remained. Pirate lords rose to power, creating new empires built on fear. One such warlord, a reptilian creature with jagged teeth, stood on the bridge of a stolen cruiser, watching his forces raid another helpless colony. No humans to protect you now, he hissed over the comms. The colony's governor, his face covered in soot and blood, whispered back, no humans to protect you either. You just don't know it yet. The warlord laughed, but somewhere deep inside, he felt a strange unease. Every pirate, every tyrant, every petty conqueror across the stars carried the same quiet fear. The humans were gone, but what if they were watching? Meanwhile, in the cold shadow of a dying star, a forgotten human relay flickered to life. It had remained silent since the day Earth withdrew. Now, a small fleet of alien refugees found it by accident. Their ships were damaged, their supplies gone, their people starving. They approached cautiously, sending a distress signal. To their shock, the station responded. A holographic message appeared in their cockpit. A man's face, human, calm and composed. If you are seeing this, the recording said, then you are survivors. The galaxy will suffer without unity, but it will not die. Learn. Change. When the time comes, when the silence becomes unbearable, you will know where to find us. The refugees watched the message play on repeat, tears in their eyes. For the first time in years, they felt hope. But back in the council's capital, hope was fading. The government had fractured. Worlds stopped answering to the council. Systems fell under local control. The once proud Senate Hall was filled with shouting, desperation, and blame. This is your fault, one alien roared. You exiled the only species that ever cared about the rest of us. Another delegate shouted back. They left because they couldn't control themselves. They were too dangerous. The argument devolved into chaos until the speaker slammed his staff against the floor. Enough, he bellowed. We stand here debating while the galaxy burns. His voice echoed through the chamber, then faded into silence. He looked at the faces around him, fearful, defeated, hopeless. We will not survive this unless we change. The humans may never return, but we can still learn from them. That night, the speaker sat alone in his office, the rain still falling outside. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass as he watched lightning flash over the city. On his desk lay an old data crystal, the one containing the final recordings of the last meeting with humanity. He inserted it into his console, and the hologram flickered to life. The human ambassador appeared again, his voice steady, his tone calm but firm. Empires don't fall when their armies are defeated, the recording said. They fall when they forget compassion. When logic becomes pride. When progress becomes power. Remember that, if you ever find yourselves alone. The speaker sat there for hours, replaying those words over and over again, until dawn began to break. In the morning, he gathered what remained of the council leadership. We can't rebuild the old alliance, he said. But we can start again. We can honor what we destroyed. He proposed forming a new network, a cooperative of survivors, focused not on power but on preservation. At first, the delegates resisted. Without fleets or trade, what do we have to offer? One asked bitterly. The speaker answered softly, we have regret. We have lessons. And if humanity ever hears of our efforts, perhaps they'll know we finally understand. Slowly, the others agreed. For months, they worked in secret, sending aid to starving worlds, repairing what technology they could, and spreading a simple message across the stars: peace begins with empathy. The phrase appeared on transmissions, carved into ruins, whispered by refugees. It became the symbol of a fragile rebirth. For the first time since humanity's exile, the galaxy had something to believe in again. Then, one evening, as the speaker prepared another broadcast, his aide rushed into the room. "Sir," she cried, "you need to see this." She pulled up a live feed from a deep space observatory. The speaker leaned forward, his heart pounding. A massive object had appeared near the edge of known space, an enormous fleet, larger than anything the Council had ever built. But it didn't attack. It simply drifted, silent and waiting. The aide whispered, "Is it pirates?" The speaker's eyes widened as he zoomed in on the lead ship. There, on its hull, glowed a symbol no one had seen in years, a silver circle surrounding a blue sphere. The emblem of Earth. Humanity had returned. The speaker fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "They came back," he whispered. "After everything, they came back." Across the galaxy, transmissions crackled to life, and every world heard the same message in a calm, human voice. "This is Earth Command. We are monitoring all frequencies. Remain where you are. Help is coming." For the first time in generations, the stars seemed to shine brighter. And as the message spread from one world to another, the galaxy realized the truth of the words the humans had once spoken. Emotion was not weakness, it was strength. Compassion was not a flaw, it was the foundation of civilization. Humanity had walked away to teach them that lesson, and now, when the galaxy finally understood, they had returned, not as conquerors, but as guardians. The speaker stood at his window, looking out at the sky glowing with new light. "We thought their silence was abandonment," he whispered, "but it was mercy." And as the great human fleet moved silently across the void, the galaxy that had once cast them out fell to its knees in gratitude. The age of arrogance was over. The age of understanding had begun. The first human signal in years spread across the galaxy like a wave of light breaking through centuries of shadow. Every world, every station, every ship that still had power received it. A calm, familiar human voice echoed through static. "This is Earth Command. To all surviving civilizations, remain where you are. Assistance is en route. The age of division has ended." For many, it sounded like a miracle. For others, it sounded like judgment. But for everyone, it meant one thing: humanity had returned. On the crumbling capital of the Galactic Council, the message was met with disbelief. The speaker stood before the great viewing window as dozens of transmissions filled the air. Reports came from every corner of the galaxy, massive human fleets emerging from hyperspace, shimmering with blue energy shields, their ships larger and more advanced than anything ever seen before. "They're helping us," one aide whispered. "They're repairing the collapsed star lanes, sending medical drones, rebuilding communications." The speaker's heart trembled with a mix of relief and shame. "After everything we did to them," he said softly, "they still choose mercy." Within days, humanity's ships reached the broken worlds. On Tarsis 4, the planet once consumed by famine, the people looked up to see giant human vessels blotting out the sun. Thousands of small pods detached, landing gently on the surface. When the hatches opened, medical teams in white armor stepped out, their faces hidden behind mirrored helmets. The alien citizens fell to their knees, weeping. One human knelt beside a starving child, offering food and clean water. "It's over," the medic said softly. "You're safe now." Across the galaxy, scenes like this repeated. Worlds once abandoned now filled with life and hope again. But not everyone welcomed humanity's return. The warlords who had risen from the Council's collapse saw the human fleets as a threat to their power. They gathered their stolen ships, forming coalitions to resist. "They think they can rule again," one pirate leader hissed. "We'll show them we bow to no one." They launched attacks on several human convoys. The response came not in anger, but precision. Without firing a single shot, the human ships activated an electromagnetic pulse that disabled the pirates' entire fleet in seconds. Then, through every radio channel, a single message played: "You can rebuild with us, or fall alone. Choose." None dared to resist again. The Council watched as humanity reshaped the galaxy. The humans didn't reclaim power, they restored balance. They rebuilt the destroyed communication networks, reopened trade lanes, and re-established peacekeeping forces. But they did something even more powerful. They forgave. On the Council's homeworld, where rain still fell over ruins, human engineers arrived in silence. They didn't come to punish, they came to rebuild. When the speaker stepped out to greet them, he expected coldness, but instead, the lead human extended his hand. "We remember," the human said quietly, "and we forgive." The speaker took the hand with trembling fingers, his voice breaking. "We don't deserve it." The humans smiled faintly. "Then prove that you do." As Reconstruction spread, humanity founded a new order, not an empire, but an alliance based on respect and trust. It was called the Concord of Stars. Every planet that had suffered was invited to join. There were no rulers, no central authority, only a shared promise: to protect life and never repeat the mistakes of arrogance. The Council, humbled and nearly extinct, accepted Earth's invitation. For the first time, their meetings were held not on Arix Prime or any alien world, but on Earth itself. When the new delegates arrived on Earth, they were struck by its beauty. Blue oceans glimmered like gemstones, vast forests stretched across continents, and towering cities shone with golden light. Humanity had advanced far beyond what the Council remembered. Floating towers connected by energy bridges lined the skies, while drones tended to parks filled with both human and alien visitors. The former speaker, now old and frail, stood on a balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean, speaking with a young human diplomat. "We thought you were gone forever," he said softly. "We thought you would let us die." The diplomat looked at the horizon, where the sun dipped below the clouds. "We almost did," she said. "But mercy is humanity's greatest weapon. You taught us that when you mocked us for feeling." Over the following months, Earth became the heart of renewal. Scientists from dozens of species worked together in human laboratories. Artists painted the rebuilding of worlds. Children from across the galaxy attended the new Academy of Concord, where they learned not only science and history, but empathy, compassion, and the meaning of cooperation. For the first time, logic and emotion existed in harmony. Yet not everything was peaceful. In the deep corners of space, remnants of the old power still lurked. The former elite, those who had profited from the Council's arrogance, began plotting. "Humanity thinks they've won," one shadowy figure said during a secret meeting. "But they're spreading their ideals too fast. They'll make the galaxy dependent on them again." Another responded bitterly, "Then we'll remind them what happens when they trust too easily." Unbeknownst to Earth, a plan was already forming, a network of sabotage, deceit, and rebellion that sought to undo the fragile peace. On Earth, Admiral Renee Holt, commander of the Orbital Defense Fleet, watched the outer sensors with unease. "They're rebuilding faster than we predicted," she said to her officers. "But something feels off. The galaxy doesn't forget its pride overnight." Her AI assistant replied in its calm, mechanical voice. "Probability of coordinated resistance, 63%. Holt sighed. "Then we'll be ready." Meanwhile, in his quarters, the old speaker recorded a message. He knew he wouldn't live long enough to see what came next, but he wanted to leave something behind. His frail hands trembled as he spoke. "To the humans who returned when we did not deserve it, thank you. We called your compassion weakness, but it saved us. We called your emotion chaos, but it was order in disguise. May the galaxy never forget this truth. Empires fall not from defeat, but from pride. May we never be blind again." He sent the recording to Earth's archive, where it would be preserved forever. That night, he died peacefully in his sleep as rain fell softly outside, just as it had on the day humanity returned. But far beyond Earth's reach, in the shadows of uncharted space, the old enemies stirred. Faint signals pulsed between abandoned satellites, encrypted, defiant. The age of peace was young, and not everyone was ready to accept it. Humanity had rebuilt the galaxy, but something darker was rising, something that remembered humiliation and dreamed of revenge. As the first stars of dawn rose over Earth's horizon, Admiral Holt stood on the command deck, her gaze fixed on the heavens. "The galaxy sleeps easy tonight," she said softly. "But peace is never forever." She turned to her officers. "Stay sharp. If they come for us again, we'll remind them why humanity walked away once, and what happened the last time the galaxy forgot Rule 1. Above her, the great fleet of Earth shimmered against the rising sun, engines humming like the heartbeat of a species that had once been forgotten, but had become eternal. Humanity's silence had ended, and the galaxy once again heard their voice. This time, it would never fade. The galaxy had entered a fragile new dawn. Worlds that once burned now bloomed again, and where fleets once clashed, ships now carried aid and trade. For the first time in generations, stars that had flickered dim with war began to shine brighter with hope. Humanity's return had brought peace, but peace built on wounds never heals easily. The scars of pride, fear, and betrayal still ran deep through the hearts of countless civilizations. Many accepted the new order with gratitude, yet others watched humanity's rise with quiet unease. The whispers began in the shadows. They came back too strong. They forgave too easily. Maybe they planned it all. On Earth, the new Galactic Concord headquarters rose high above the clouds. It was a marvel of unity, built by human and alien hands, powered by hybrid technology, its walls lined with symbols from every species that had survived the collapse. At the center of this shining tower sat the Concord Council, a diverse assembly that met under Earth's blue sky, with humanity once again guiding the galaxy, but this time with humility. In one of those meetings, the human ambassador, Myra Holt, stood before the gathered leaders. Her voice was calm but firm. "We are not here to rule. We are here to rebuild a galaxy worth trusting again." The delegates nodded, but even in that room of peace, she could feel tension in the air. There were still those who had not forgotten the humiliation of kneeling before humans for help. Far from Earth, in the ruins of the former Galactic Empire, something stirred. Deep in a forgotten sector of space, an old warlord named Dravik watched from the bridge of his battered cruiser. His eyes burned with hatred as he looked at the broadcasts of humanity's rebuilding efforts. "They call this peace," he snarled. "They erase our empires, our history, and call themselves saviors. We'll remind them what true power is." Around him, lieutenants nodded, their armor dented, their faces hardened by years of bitterness. They had once been rulers under the old council, and now they were outcasts. "Begin the awakening," Dravik ordered. It's time the humans remembered fear. Over the following months, strange events began across the galaxy. Human supply ships vanished without a trace. Communication hubs in the outer sectors went silent again. The Concord dismissed them as technical issues, but Admiral Renee Holt knew better. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, Valiant Dawn, her eyes fixed on the star map. "This pattern isn't random," she muttered. "They're probing us, testing our response." Her second-in-command frowned. "Do we strike first?" Holt shook her head. "No. If we act without proof, we'll look like the old council, paranoid and cruel. We'll wait until they show themselves." But waiting came at a cost. Soon, the attacks grew bolder. Mining colonies on the outer rim were raided by unknown fleets. Civilians vanished, their distress signals echoing across empty space. The Concord tried to maintain calm, but fear spread faster than light. Old grudges reawakened as alien factions began blaming each other. Some accused humanity of fabricating the crisis to keep control. The media turned vicious, broadcasting endless debates. Has Earth truly changed? Is the galaxy once again bending to human will? The peace that had taken years to build began to tremble like glass under pressure. In her office overlooking the Pacific, Myra Holt received a message marked urgent. It was from Admiral Renee Holt, her sister. They are back, the admiral's voice said, grim and cold. The warlords. I've tracked their transmissions. They're gathering in the Corim Nebula. They've united under one banner. They call themselves the Remnants. Myra's blood ran cold. How many ships? Hundreds, came the answer. And they're building more. They've stolen human designs, twisted them, made them weapons of vengeance. Myra leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. They want to finish what the old council started. Her sister's voice lowered. They won't get the chance. Not this time. Within days, the remnants struck. Fleets of stolen warships descended on newly rebuilt colonies, annihilating everything in their path. They didn't just want destruction. They wanted to send a message. You saved the galaxy. One of their broadcasts taunted. Then watch it burn again. Panic spread. The Concorde fleet scrambled to respond, but the remnants moved with terrifying precision. They knew every human tactic, every weak point, every habit. They had studied humanity's kindness and turned it into a weapon. On Earth, the Concorde Council met in emergency session. The delegates shouted over one another, demanding action. Destroy them, one cried. Negotiate, said another. You can't reason with revenge. Myra slammed her hand on the table. Enough. The room fell silent. Her eyes blazed with determination. We didn't come this far to start another war of arrogance. We'll defend what we've built, but we'll do it with honor. If they want to destroy peace, we'll show them what true strength looks like. Admiral Holt launched Operation Dawnshield, the largest defensive mobilization in history. Hundreds of human and alien ships formed massive defense lines around key worlds. For the first time, the entire galaxy stood together, not under fear, but under purpose. The remnant fleets approached, a black wave of hate and fire, their ships carved with the old council's sigils. The sky above Corim Prime exploded into chaos as both sides clashed. Plasma fire lit up the void, and debris rained like shooting stars. Amid the carnage, Admiral Holt's voice echoed through every comm channel. This is for every world that fell when we walked away. This is for the ones who believed in peace. The battle raged for hours, stretching into days. The remnants fought with fury, but the Concorde fought with unity. Human and alien ships moved as one, covering each other, saving lives rather than seeking glory. Slowly, the tide turned. The remnant flagship, a monstrous fortress built from the wrecks of dozens of ships, fell under concentrated fire. As it exploded in a brilliant flash, Admiral Holt's voice whispered, Rule 1, Dravik. Never mistake mercy for weakness. When the smoke cleared, the galaxy watched in awe. The remnants were gone, their fleets scattered to the void. The cost had been high, thousands of ships lost, countless lives sacrificed, but the peace had survived. Humanity had proven once again that strength and compassion could coexist. Weeks later, a memorial was held on Earth. The speaker's statue stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by flags of every species. Myra Holt spoke before the gathered crowd, her voice carrying through the soft evening air. We learned long ago that pride brings ruin, and silence brings sorrow. But today, we learned something new. That unity born from understanding can survive even the darkest hate. The galaxy may tremble again someday, but this time, it will not fall. As night fell, the stars shimmered above the crowd. The people of every world looked up, remembering the long years of silence, the pain, the rebuilding. For the first time in history, they no longer feared the darkness between the stars. They had seen what humanity could do, not through domination, but through heart. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, a faint human beacon pulsed steadily in the void. A reminder to all who would ever forget. Rule number 1, never mistake compassion for weakness. And this time, the galaxy truly understood. The war was over, but the echoes of it still haunted the stars. The fires that once consumed the galaxy had faded, leaving behind trails of wreckage, drifting ships, and silent worlds. The Concorde had prevailed, but victory came at a price written in blood and sacrifice. On Earth, the skies were filled with returning fleets, some limping, some broken, all carrying the weight of those who would never return. The people stood in the streets, watching the ships descend through the clouds, their engines leaving trails of gold across the twilight sky. Humanity had saved the galaxy once again, not with domination, but with unity. Yet deep inside every heart, human and alien alike, there lingered a quiet question. Would the peace last this time? In the days that followed, the rebuilding began anew. Earth's orbit became a living workshop as repair docks, transport ships, and aid convoys fanned out toward every corner of the galaxy. Massive cargo vessels departed daily, carrying food, medicine, and materials to the wounded worlds. The galaxy was healing, but it was fragile, like glass mended after being shattered. In the grand chamber of the Concord, the new leadership met to ensure that this peace would not be lost again. Myra Holt stood at the center of the table, her eyes tired but bright with determination. Around her sat the representatives of dozens of species, all scarred from war yet bound together by something far stronger than treaties: trust. The remnants are gone, she said quietly, her voice steady. But their shadow remains. If we let pride return, if we let fear divide us again, everything we built will fall. We cannot let that happen. This alliance must become more than survival, it must become belief. The room fell silent as her words hung in the air. Then a small alien delegate, his scales pale and cracked from the famine his people endured, raised his hand. "And what of humanity?" he asked softly. "You rebuilt us. You saved us again. How do we repay what we owe?" Myra smiled faintly, though her eyes glistened. "By never letting it happen again," she said. "By teaching your children what ours learned too late, that empathy is not weakness, and unity is not surrender." Meanwhile, on the far edge of known space, Admiral Renee Holt stood aboard her flagship, Valiant Dawn, overlooking a battlefield now turned into a graveyard. Thousands of wrecks floated silently, remnants of both human and alien ships. Their lights flickered faintly, like dying stars. Her officers moved quietly, scanning for survivors. "We'll honor every name," she said softly. "Every soul that fell to protect what we built." Her second-in-command approached, carrying a small holographic beacon. "We found this, Admiral. It's a remnant transmission. Looks like it was recorded before their defeat." Holt nodded. "Play it." The hologram flickered to life, revealing Dravik, the warlord who had led the rebellion. His face was gaunt, his voice filled with bitterness. "You think you've won," he growled. "But victory built on mercy is weakness. Someday, your compassion will destroy you." The hologram crackled, and then his tone changed, quieter, almost regretful. "But perhaps, that's what makes you different. You fight not to conquer, but to protect. Maybe that's why we never truly understood you." The image faded, leaving silence in its wake. The Admiral turned to her crew. "He was wrong about one thing," she said. "Mercy isn't what destroys us, it's what saves us." On Earth, weeks later, the galaxy gathered once more for remembrance. The great plaza outside the Concord Tower was filled with beings from every world. Some in robes, some in armor, others in simple clothes worn thin from years of struggle. Above them, a colossal hologram projected the faces of those lost in the wars that had scarred the stars. Music played softly, a haunting human melody carried by a choir that sang in a dozen languages. When Myra Holt stepped forward to speak, the crowd fell silent. "We once thought we could stand alone," she began. "We thought logic was enough, that power made us invincible. But when we turned our backs on each other, the galaxy fell silent. It was not the silence of peace, but the silence of regret. We learned that compassion is not something to fear, that emotion is not a flaw, it's our strength. Humanity left once, and the galaxy nearly died. We came back not for vengeance, but to remind ourselves, that survival without heart is no life at all." As she spoke, the sky above shimmered with light. Dozens of human and alien ships formed glowing constellations, their lights blinking in patterns that mirrored the ancient star maps of Earth's explorers. The sight made even the oldest veterans weep. Children pointed to the sky in awe. Somewhere in the crowd, An old alien scholar whispered to a child beside him, "Those lights, they are their promise." After the ceremony, Myra stood alone on the balcony, looking at the horizon where the sea met the sky. Her sister, Admiral Holt, joined her, her uniform still scorched from battle. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Myra said softly, "Do you think they'll ever forget again?" The Admiral looked up at the stars. "They might," she admitted. "But that's why we'll remind them. That's why we'll stay." She turned to her sister, a faint smile crossing her lips. "You know, when we left the council all those years ago, I thought it was the end. But maybe it was just the beginning." Far beyond Earth, in the cold depths of space, the last human beacon, the same one that had once repeated end of contact. The galaxy must learn alone, now transmitted a new message. It spread through the stars, across worlds still healing, to ships sailing in the dark. It carried no warning, no threat, only a simple truth. Humanity returns not to rule, but to guide. The stars belong to all who remember why they shine. Years passed, and the galaxy changed. Planets once divided by race or greed began to merge their cultures, share their knowledge, and teach their young not about power, but about purpose. The phrase "Rule Number One" became part of every child's education. It was no longer about war or fear. It was about the lesson that shaped the galaxy's destiny. Never mistake kindness for weakness. And in that new age, statues of humans and aliens stood side by side on countless worlds, not as conquerors or victims, but as reminders of what was lost and what was finally found. Humanity had left once to teach the galaxy a lesson. When they returned, they didn't demand thanks or tribute. They gave something far greater: hope. On the 1000th sunrise since peace was restored, a new fleet launched from Earth's orbit, crewed not by humans alone, but by every species that had survived. Their destination: the uncharted void beyond known space. As the fleet vanished into the stars, a child watching from the surface asked her teacher, "Where are they going?" The teacher smiled, her eyes reflecting the rising sun. "To make sure no one forgets what silence costs," she said. The stars shimmered like diamonds above the blue planet that had once been dismissed as emotional, unpredictable, and weak. Now it was the heart of the galaxy, the symbol of unity, mercy, and resilience. And though centuries would pass, one truth would remain carved into every monument, every heart, and every world that had lived through the age of arrogance and rebirth. When humans walked out, the galaxy fell silent. When they returned, the stars began to sing again.